we are now going to move straight into our next session, and I'm just going to invite Neil to the stage. So I'd like to introduce you to Neil Golightly. So Neil is the Business Services Manager for Cairn Housing Association, and Neil's going to be joining me to talk about the journey that they've been on in relation to the digital transformation and the role that that's played within their culture, the organisation and well-being. So Neil and I are just going to have a bit of a chat. Hopefully we'll get some interaction from the floor, so feel free to ask any questions or to give your response to some of the things that Neil is talking about. I've had a bit of an insight to some of the stuff that Cairn Housing Association have done before now, and some of what they've achieved is really quite impressive. So give me a second, I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, right, wait a minute, it's doing that blinky blink thing. It doesn't like it if it goes onto a big screen when you've not got it full screen. It does that really blinky thing. So, here we go. So, Neil, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is just give us a wee bit of background initially around who Cairn Housing Association are, and a wee bit about what your role is.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Esther, and hi everyone. Cairn's a Scottish charity and a registered social landlord. We're quite unusual for a Scottish housing association, and that really stems from our roots. Back in the 1980s, we were the Scottish arm of the Royal British Legion Housing Association. So that meant we had sheltered housing courts all around the country for ex-services and their families. But over time, through stock transfers and new build programs, we've largely moved away from providing care services to providing more family homes. And today we've got about 3,500 homes, and they're across 24 different local authority areas, from Thurso up near John O'Groats to Newcastle and in the Borders, and Campbellton out on the Kintyre Peninsula. So we're quite an odd housing association, and that presents a lot of challenges for how we provide services to customers.
So can you just talk about the Cairn Housing approach to staff wellbeing?
Yeah, we've organised a huge amount over the last 8 years, modernised, over the last 8 years. I think Cairn did used to be quite a stuffy and bureaucratic organisation. I think it could probably be characterised more now as being quite agile and innovative. I think we've developed a reputation in our sector for being quite forward thinking and willing to try new things. And of course, we understand that we need to take our staff along with us to meet our objectives. So we've got a really big emphasis on staff engagement in Cairn. This is, you can see this in quite competitive salaries for the third sector anyway. We've got really flexible working practices and good staff benefits. A few years ago, we had staff engagement as Cairn's wildly important goal for the year, which meant that every manager in the organisation were making weekly commitments about how we could improve staff engagement. And these were all monitored through our annual Best Companies survey, which is the Sunday Times Best Companies to Work For list, and the Franklin Covey Project Management Framework. So even before coronavirus, we had good systems in place and equipment to support working from home, but it was never at a scale that we ever would have imagined, or at least not what I would have imagined.
So it's really interesting to see an organisation, a public sector organisation, being able to compete with the private sector companies in relation to employee engagement. And I think being named as one of the 50 top best companies to work for is a great achievement. Mm-hmm. So how does the whole digital landscape then fit into your team's wellbeing?
Well, I think first and foremost it's about, if we can make people's jobs easier for them, then it makes it a better job for them. So we've got a really excellent digital strategy in place, and it sets out all the aims and objectives for how we're going to utilize technology. Again, because I was saying earlier, we're spread over such a huge area, our team really appreciate when technology helps them with their jobs. So the strategy focuses on some key objectives. I've got them here. We focus on inbound and outbound channel shift, better profiling and persona information for segmenting our customers, increasing digital transactions and inquiries, consolidating our systems, automating our services, increasing delegated authority to our frontline staff. And that's about maximizing our income and reducing our costs and time for each transaction.
It's quite interesting actually that you can measure most of them, because I know that a lot of the organisations that I work with, when you talk about cost to serve, people are having to use estimates, or they're not actually clear. So was that a bit of a challenge when you had to get that baseline information, or is it something that's just embedded within the way that the organisation does things?
No, we kind of had to we had to start from scratch from it. I mean, I think because of the size of Cairn, we're not a local authority or a public sector organisation. We are relatively small. It's a £16 million a year business or organisation. We've got about 180 staff. A lot of them are working in these sheltered and retirement courts. A small team. So what we had a project manager leading the digital strategy, and she spent a huge amount of time going out and doing process mapping for all the different services and the workflows that we'd create in our new systems. And that allowed us to sort of see the time for different elements of those services and how much time or cost was wasted on quite kind of archaic processes that we had, where you'd be stamping a bunch of bits of paper to send them out for tenants to fill in, to send them back. All that adds cost, paper, energy, time.
Yeah.
And we could put a value to that. I mean, I think it's a useful internal measure that maybe wouldn't stand up to a huge amount of scrutiny, but it helps us to see where the points are in the business that we can make great efficiencies.
And that's the thing, like, it's not even so much things about standing up to external scrutiny, but if you're using the same measurement before your change and after your change, and you can then demonstrate it, then I think you're probably a lot further down the road than a lot of organisations. So over the last 8 months then, how have your team coped with the pandemic and the changes in the way that customers have wanted to do business with you?
Yeah, well, we had the great idea, or it seemed like a great idea at the time, that we were going to launch completely new systems for how we manage all our customer inquiries and interactions. We're going to launch them on the 1st of April. About 10 days before that, the country went into lockdown and all our offices closed, and we're plunged into a bit of a crisis like everyone else. But the contact centre team, we talked to the team, and they really wanted to crack on. They managed brilliantly under incredibly difficult circumstances. They'd already been involved in quite a bit of training and testing and designing the systems, so they were all very confident, and they'd had a lot of one-to-one sessions booked. And we had the build team in as backup in that crucial first week after going live. We were using an agile project management approach, so our build team were, I say our build team, it was 2 people, but our build team were on hand constantly through Microsoft Teams to pick up any change requests, and they were constantly learning, updating, and improving the systems to adapt to the real world use. So this gave the contact center team, I think this is really important, it gave the contact center team a real sense of ownership over their own systems, their own tools, and their own success, and they just hadn't had that before. We did really quickly realise that Cairn was going to be incredibly dependent on our wee contact centre team to keep the show on the road. So we had to look at what we were going to be able to do to support them, especially with a lot of them having kids at home. Obviously, the schools were all closed. So it was a really difficult situation for them. But we didn't have the option, because of the specialisms in that team and the training in that team, we didn't have the option to put any of them on furlough. So we had to look at what we could do to support them through the crisis.
Some of the changes that you've been able to implement as part of the approach. Can you just talk through some of the changes to routine and how you supported your staff that were working at home?
Yeah, I think we kind of took. I really like. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but I really like Dave Brailsford, who used to be the sporting director of the British cycling team, and he he had this thing, and there's some brilliant YouTube interviews with him. He had this thing about the marginal gains and the increment of marginal gains, and the idea that doing lots of really small adjustments would help achieve your bigger objectives. So for us, that was about just kind of looking at that whole experience of what our contact center team were going through, and also what the customers were going through, and just thinking about all the really little things that we could do that would add up to make their jobs easier and the services better for customers. So, I mean, there's a fair list of things that we did. We obviously, a lot of our services were suspended initially. So there was a lot of communications going out to tenants to manage the expectations of the services around things like routine repairs, and also a lot of communications to our staff to make sure that they were aware of what Cairn was doing to respond to the crisis and what their role was going to be in it. We very quickly moved our opening time back 30 minutes to have a morning debrief with the team, which was really important, actually one of the most important things that we do. And that meant that we could have a bit of training or providing information to them, because they didn't have that serendipity of all being in the office together. But it was also just a really good time to catch up with each other, and gave us that little bit of flexibility where if people needed to spend a little bit more time with their kids that morning, they could do that before the phones started coming through. We closed our service to phone calls with digital inquiries only from 3:30 p.m. So in the afternoon, we had a slot as well, which was about digital only. So this had kind of two benefits, really. It helped push channel shift, which was something that we wanted to take some big steps on, but also reduced that pressure on the team as well. We brought in assistance from other teams to help at busier times. And again, that was to give the contact center team a little bit more of an opportunity to take a breather and to go and look after their kids. We did an experiment with Digital Fridays for 6 weeks, where we switched off phone lines entirely every Friday. That was partly because we were a bit short-staffed on a Friday. We had one colleague who was off long-term sick, which was putting a bit of pressure on us for Fridays, but it was also an experiment to see what the impact on the services would be. The downside was that our busier time on Monday mornings got a fair bit busier, because people just started calling on Monday instead, which caused us a different problem. We were already using Microsoft Teams for the contact center team, but that started to be more important. And we've got a kind of banter channel on there that people make really good use of. We've got a WhatsApp group as well. I think contact centers are by nature very sociable and chatty people. So they missed having that time together. They missed being in the office, and they would often arrive early in the office so they could sit and have a cup of tea with each other and things before the phone line switched on. So they missed having that. So it was important we put that back in some way. We knew that the team were struggling to juggle work with homeschooling and some other care requirements. So we dropped everyone's hours by 20% during lockdown. We were able to do that because of these digital times. So we dropped their hours by 20%, but not their pay. We had weekly staff welfare calls with their line managers. We had team meeting speakers on mental health. We were scheduled to have a staff conference in autumn, but we changed it up to an out-of-office festival for the whole organisation, with a big focus on staff welfare and well-being. So we're doing sessions on yoga, exercises that you could do at your desk, mindfulness, laughter size. There was a big pub quiz as well at the end of the week, so that was really good. We moved to a new system for staff engagement surveys. So we moved away from the annual best company survey, and now we do weekly pulse surveys. Our CEO published weekly blogs, or video blogs on our intranet. We had a staff award scheme for our lockdown heroes. So staff were able to nominate colleagues who had gone above and beyond the call of duty during lockdown. We had an award ceremony for them, and we did a big video to celebrate it internally. This was a good one. Every member of staff got an extra day's annual leave as a thank you for their efforts during lockdown. We did things like we posted out the contact centre. We posted some stationery out to them. Where people didn't have the right equipment, we took out desks and chairs from the office out to them. So we just tried to make sure that we covered all our bases so that people were supported enough to be able to get on with their jobs.
I mean, it's really quite a comprehensive approach, and I think one of the really interesting things that you've done is really made the people a focus. And I think that with some organisations have been so focused on the delivery, and the managers have been so focused on the delivery, that it's not necessarily that people they've forgotten about their teams, but actually they just haven't actually had that headspace to be able to do it. And it's really interesting to see the breadth of stuff that you've actually been able to do to invest in your people.
Well, I think we started by thinking about our teams rather than thinking about the services. So we thought about what our teams needed and what services we would be able to reliably provide in the medium to long term in the circumstances that we're in. Because we knew right from the start it wasn't going to be over in a month. So we knew we were in it for a long haul. So I think it was quite an important decision early on. And it wasn't just for the contact center. Obviously, all the other colleagues were affected by it as well.
Yeah. So you've talked a bit around some of the changes, some which I think was part of an overall strategy, and some which were driven really by necessity around staff availability, shortened opening hours, your Digital Friday. So how have your tenants responded to the changes?
I'd say it's been good news so far. We haven't done an annual tenant satisfaction survey this year. Yeah, we're doing one next spring. So I don't have a huge amount of data on it, but we do service-specific satisfaction surveys, which are generated at the end of each inquiry, and the feedback's been really positive through it. We're a little behind where we wanted to be with promoting channel shift. My comms team were incredibly busy communicating the different changes to our services because of COVID. So our campaign and different campaigns about things like benefits advice and money advice, but we're catching up a bit with some of the promotion for channel shift. Nevertheless, we're seeing some really positive increases in registrations for a portal. I think we're up to about 25% of active users, 25% of tenants being active users. And that's been a bit of a soft launch to early adopters. So that feels quite positive about that we're on the right track. We're seeing more positive results in the use of web chat and Facebook Messenger, which is still quite small compared to our calls and emails, but they're increasing month on month. It's quite a steep curve. So what's been really interesting, I think, for us is that the digital channels have been great for people that are looking for information, but they seem to want to call in to request a service. So I think there's something there about building trust with digital services, and maybe some of our accountability to be able to show to customers that they're going to receive that service if they communicate with us digitally as well as when they phone. I think if anything, the relationship with customers has improved this year. I've really encouraged my team to be authentic about what's going on. So if their kids are running around, they should acknowledge that. They can acknowledge that they are, stuck at their kitchen table and they're missing people. We're really aware that we've probably about half of our tenants are quite elderly, and it might be that we're the only people that they've spoken to that day. So,
and Neil, I suppose that is quite an important thing, and I think that working with local authorities as well is that, when we're pushing the channel shift agenda, it has been mindful of those people who accessing the service. There's maybe a bit more to it than that, and there is that social aspect. And I know it's one of the things that I've been working with organisations that are looking at the future for cash collection, and it's a really complex issue about why people still come into the council to pay cash when they pay loads of other things through electronic means. And actually, a lot of the time, it's down to that kind of social aspect of it. So I think it's really important to recognise that.
Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of work in the year before the launch of these new systems in April. And we did a lot of work in that year before in trying to get a better handle on our customer personas and how prepared people were to move to digital services. So we did personas. So I've got them here actually. We did we segmented them into 5 groups: the digital advocates, so they're like your early adopters; tech savvy pragmatists; the digitally reluctant; the left behind Lisas; and the tech averse. And so we're going the full spectrum for people who are, they're already using digital banking and all these kind of things. So they're up for it. They just need to get the right tools in front of them and they'll use them. To people who, they might be older people or their economic circumstances don't allow them to be online. And for them, they can still call in when COVID's over, our offices will still be open to some extent for people to drop in for visitors. So I think the number of potential additional active users of our online services are so great that we can concentrate on reaching those easy to reach groups, and actually the hard to reach groups can continue using services in the old way. We're not going to switch them off. So we're actually quite a long way away from the point where we're looking at people who maybe aren't online at the moment and thinking, well, we have to try and persuade you to get online. So it's not about that. It's about providing the right services to folk.
So, I mean, you've given us a lot of positives. Looking back, what would you have done differently?
Well, I think I'd have to put a health check on answering this by saying we've not really done a full lessons learned yet. We're getting to that point, but we're probably still managing our way through an evolving crisis. Edinburgh's in tier 3. We're in 24 different local authority areas, and we've got a route map which adjusts where people are on different lockdown scenarios. I think something that we probably hadn't really anticipated was how reliant we were going to be on the quality of home broadband.
Yeah,
particularly for our contact center staff, who, if my broadband, other than speaking at this conference today, if my broadband goes to bits, I could still work in Word on something, or I could go and take a walk, or I've got flexible working, so I could just pack it in for the day and start again tomorrow. But for our contact center, we're really relying on them being online all the time. So I think we are looking now at ways that we can help the team to get more reliable connections. That's something that we should have been looking at from the start from a business continuity perspective. But it also puts additional pressure on the team where they're feeling stressed out about that they've taken out a contract for broadband, which was designed for watching Netflix. It wasn't for managing their jobs. I think as well, we had some tough decisions we have to take on our rota as we're responding to the needs of customers. And it would have been great if that had been done before the pandemic, but that's been put back a bit. With the benefit of hindsight, I think overall we've really looked after our team, and they've certainly really enjoyed it. Not enjoyed it. Sorry, that's a terrible thing to say. They've appreciated the support that they've had from Kieran, I think.
So you've talked about the broadband. Any other tips that you would give to people in the room or anybody watching?
I think at Kieran we're always questioning the idea of what a working day looks like, and what we keep coming back to is if the job's getting done and the staff are feeling supported and motivated, then the job will get done. So a lot of the old rules that we had just don't make any sense anymore. And I was saying at the start that Kieran's changed a huge amount. We've got to the point now where we don't have things like core hours. For some services, our contact center, obviously they're a frontline service, so they need to be on at certain times. But we've got so much flexibility now, and because we're already embracing home working before this all happened, we'd already learned that lesson that actually, if you trust people, give them the right tools for the job, people generally get up in the morning wanting to do a good job, so they'll get on with it if you don't get in their way. So I think trust in staff is just a huge opportunity, and different managers will have different attitudes towards that. And I think our managers have gone on a bit of a journey about giving up more control and trusting people that are at home. But I'm always mindful as well. There's that excellent quote about never wasting a good crisis. And we really wanted to modernise services and push for channel shift, and the COVID situation just created fantastic opportunities for that. There's never a better time or an easier time to experiment with new models of service delivery. And I think we've had the support from senior managers and board. Sometimes it's been the idea that it's easier to come by forgiveness than consent. But that kind of experimental culture and experimental attitude in our team about, well, we'll try something, we'll give it a bash. If it doesn't work, then we can try something else or go back. And that serves us really well, I think.
So I just wanted to pick up a couple of questions that I had as you were going through. Like, one of the things that you talked about was the pulse surveys. So one of the things that I think sometimes organisations are not always that good at is that they do the surveys, but then there's no that follow up. So people think, well, I'm giving you all this feedback and you're not doing anything about it. How do you make sure that you close that loop?
Well, I can talk about the annual surveys, what our approach was to that. With that one, there was a high level overview of the organisation's results, but then we took that down to team level, and our HR team provided slide decks for every manager to take into team meetings, and we were asked to prepare areas for improvement, or the smaller things, the quick wins that we could do to try and improve staff engagement. So we had a really good feedback loop around the annual surveys. Moving into the new Pulse surveys, they've only been live for, I'm not even sure it's 2 months. So we're still kind of gathering our baseline data to be able to respond to it. But in the meantime, the system allows us to respond to kind of improvement notices that are coming through that. So if a member of my team responds with low engagement on certain questions, then it prompts me to engage with them through the system confidentially to respond to their feedback and to try and explore what we can do about it. So it's working quite well on quite an individual level, but we haven't quite got to the point yet where we're going to be using the data for everyone.
No, okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Neil regarding the changes? I mean, I just think it's really impressive what you've been able to do within the, and I know that you said it's quite a small team, but I think the investment in your people coupled by your ability to really adapt to the changing demands of customers has been really impressive. And I'll be watching with interest to see how that continues over the coming months. And I think channel shift's one of the things that lots of organisations really struggle with. I think everybody talks about it. Loads of business cases are based on it, but quite often we're not able to deliver against the ambition. So it's really interesting that you're seeing such positive take up on really around what's been a soft launch.
Mm-hmm.
Right, if nobody else has got any other questions, I'll just say thanks very much for your time, Neil, and apologies for running late.
No worries.
So for now, we were supposed to have Sam from the MHCLG, who was going to be presenting around mental health, but unfortunately Sam's had to go to another meeting, so she's not going to be able to present. So we're just about to bring the event to a close. I'll be around, as well, I think, a number of the other speakers, if anybody's got any questions that they'd like to ask or to follow up on. And we'll be sharing copies of the presentations and recordings of the videos within